We will call to order the August 17 meeting of the Economic Development Authority of the City of Lynchburg. Roll call. Sean Hewitt.
Here.
Patricia Mosby is absent. George Ann Sneed is absent. Kimberly Sorensen.
Here.
John Stone is here. Richard Tubman. Here. Sackett Wood.
Here.
All right, so we have a quorum. First on the agenda will be the approval of the minutes for our July 20th meeting. Those minutes are in your package. Does anybody have any comments before I accept a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve the July 20 minutes as presented. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. All right, minutes are approved. Next up is committee assignments, which is not in my packet anymore.
Uh-oh. Are
It's
they out there?
right after the. Yeah, they're out there.
Like 5 or something.
Yeah, number 5. And here's the deck you sent out.
You want me to recite them for you?
So, and as you all know, the committee assignments were made last year. We've listed who's on what committees, and if you don't want to change the committee you're on, we're just reinforcing that you are on those committees. And those committees, for your convenience, we hope, are right after this meeting, and they roll in alphabetical order. So finance, incentive, and then property throughout the year.
Yes, so the minutes or the meeting packet that's in the Dropbox does not have the same agenda. Yes, it just needs to be updated.
It probably does.
That could be my fault. Let's see. Let's go.
Should I call them?
Anyway.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't have the committee assignments. If
I can
anyone
call them out
help me
for
with
you.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Incentives, Georgianne, Kim. Property, Sackett, Sean. Finance, Pat, Richard.
The same as last year.
Very good. Does anybody have any questions on that? So to finalize, do we take a vote on this?
No, you appointed.
All right, then they're so appointed. Thank you all for your service. Next up will be an ARPA update.
Okay. I am taking that off and moving that to September. It's just, you're the conduit for, and it's not just ARPA, it's Go Virginia and all that. So I want to give you an update on it, but it didn't get handed to me in time to put it in here.
Can you just remind me what that stands for?
The American Rescue Plan Act.
Okay.
So when money came in, either from the Virginia Tourism Corporation or some of those things, that money flowed through the EDA as a conduit for it. So it either goes through council or it can go through the EDA. The EDA can act, is an authority that can act as the same type of conduit as council would be. So that is, Anna is working on that, and she's writing up it's already done and out there, but I didn't get it in the packet in time, so I'll update. It's nothing pressing. I just want to make sure you all aren't at a cocktail party or Kim's United Way meeting and somebody goes, "What are you all doing with ARPA?" And you go, "We don't know. Margette just tells us what goes on there." I don't want you to feel that way. I want you to know what's going on. So, sorry about that.
We will be reminded in September.
You will be.
Perfect. Let us move on then to our EDA 101 presentation.
Okay, and can we need to amend the May minutes. If I can ask John to put that out there. The May minutes were where you adopted the budget for 23-24, and the minutes read, you took a vote to move the budget to June to vote on. So there wouldn't have been a reason to do that, and obviously I need minutes. I need a budget that was approved before June 30th.
Yes, so what we need is a motion to amend those minutes to reflect that the fiscal year 24 budget was indeed approved by the full authority at the May meeting.
I motion so.
That's the second.
Good. So we have a motion to amend the minutes.
Kim made it.
Kim and Richard. So all in favor of the motion to amend the May minutes to reflect that the budget was approved, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Very good. We
Okay.
shall amend those minutes.
Yeah. So. Okay,
You wanna do one on one?
yeah, we're doing the presentation.
Okay. Here we go.
So at the retreat, we went over Stephen's portion and, had some discussion, and I want to get you all's, we had meant to send you a survey on that, but get you all's thoughts on that part of the meeting, just so I can plan or staff can plan in the future. Is that we've always done a half day because it's really hard for people to commit, to a whole day. But I'm really committed to you all at least having a general knowledge of the things that have to do with the EDA. And because we have such new staff here, it's really, really important for them to not just come in midway on things that we kind of, just like with you all, we go over the things that we have and some kind of general knowledge on all of that. So I really see, Keisha and I have had a lot of discussions that the handbook that is in your Dropbox is kind of like the Bible for everything. Like, we will make sure every year that we update the things in there. So that would be a place you could go and look for, performance agreement. Know that you had the performance agreement. The performance agreement itself may be in a different, area, but it would all be there in your Dropbox. And so the things that the EDA does and is responsible for, that are on your radar should be all listed in that handbook, just like the enabling legislation that brought EDAs and IDAs about, your bylaws, and those types of things. So I want you to feel comfortable with that. And if you want to know where anything is, or we need to move it so it's more accessible and easier for you all, you can please just let us know. So the agenda for today, and I'll move through this pretty quickly, is that in 2018, the EDA, we had a strategic plan done with Stephen Pedigo called the Blueprint for Opportunity. It was very, very robust in its depth, because Stephen is not only an economic development practitioner, he is a professor of economic development and business. So therefore, he left no stone unturned. We are in a position now to look at updating that plan, but we certainly updated it and reset it after the pandemic. So. Okay. So once again, we're going over what economic development is. Traditionally, it's measured in terms of jobs, income, and wealth creation for a community or locality. But it also includes, just like we're talking about with Victoria, talking about, infrastructure. It's got to be human development. Placemaking is huge. Quality of life, health and well-being, education. And once again, I consider infrastructure, all kinds of things. I consider it broadband access. Infrastructure can be talent. What kind of talent are you producing? And you all had conversations about that last time, about the fact that, we have a large number of college graduates, but they're not necessarily trained in what the job market is here. So assessments of competitiveness, belonging, and resiliency, really do matter to long-term economic growth and prosperity. And while, 7 people that sit here can't necessarily change, sometimes you all have been the only movement. I know from 2007 to 2010, there would have been nothing on the economic development front if it wasn't for you all. And I would say that We certainly had support when Reed was here in terms of these master plans, and I think we've seen great things happen from just even getting started, actually getting something in CIP and getting started there. So go to the next one, Clayton. Thank you. So the 3 goals, tried to keep it simple. We boiled it all down. If you look at the actual blueprint for opportunity, it is, like I said, very robust, but support and grow Lynchburg businesses and destination assets, drive long-term economic growth and resilience, and position, LYH as the best small city in America. So this is really about the EDA, and those of you all who are newer have asked, what are all the things? So we will go over that, and a lot of this is in your handbook and being audited as we speak. So the statement of purpose, you'll foster and encourage effective economic development activities that result in job creation, retention, increased tax base, and improve sustainability and quality of life for all citizens of Lynchburg, of the city of Lynchburg. This includes policies, programs, initiatives, and/or activities that seek to sustain and improve the economic well-being and quality of life for this community. So the history, Moses was a baby, Ted was here. Formed in 1967 by Lynchburg City Council. So you were an industrial development authority, and you exist under the Virginia Industrial Development and Revenue Bond Act. So it's 7 directors, 4-year terms, 3, you can serve 3 consecutive 4-year terms. And we are staff to you also. You are served by Ted as legal counsel and Brown Edwards as the CPA firm, and Davidson Doyle and Hilton does the audit. Yes.
To get reelected, does that have to go through city council?
Yes.
or-
Yes.
Reappointed, yes.
Okay.
And so that's part of when we'll go through all of these documents, you'll look on there and see when people's appointments come up. So the committees there are 3 standing committees. There's a finance committee, a property committee, and an incentive committee. So committees, as Ted reminds us all the time, the committees make recommendations, but the full authority must act. And the full authority cannot vote by email. You've got to physically be in person to vote on something. So Keisha and I were having the conversation this morning that the minutes are the Bible, just like city council agendas and resolutions are the Bible. So those minutes drive, what's been approved by you. So Keisha and all of us in here have to make sure that the things that need to be voted on and put there are in those minutes, because that's what Ted takes. Then that's what Brown Edwards operates off of, right? And that's where people go back. So the minutes are incredibly important. And so EDA's priorities are to make investments to support business expansion. So that's what you do when I come to you, and I will reiterate that in order to take advantage of the state's incentives, the municipality in which the project, whether it be an attraction project or an expansion project, is going to be housed, must make application to the state in order and must match some of those incentives. So if Victoria has not, if she hasn't had to go to the state for anything, then she wouldn't match. And you all have an investment policy, an incentive policy, which allows me that when I'm trying to talk to a prospect, they're all contingent upon you voting, upon you having funds, and upon a performance agreement. Mm-hmm. But that allows me to tell somebody in advance what they may be eligible for. And I would say the formula, which has been there since I've been here, and before that, is really based on the ability for you to match, what the state traditionally did, right? So your formula made it so that when you were looking at a project, your match would come up to be what the state's match was. So support site development, readiness and promotion. The promotional part of it, I think I would just say over the short period of time since we bit the bullet and had had the courage, which we could never do without you all. To have a brand, to have our own website, to make investments for master plans and things like that. We've seen great activity based on you all making those investments. So make strategic investments in talent attraction, destination development, and long-term, strategic planning. So we wouldn't have a strategic plan if it wasn't for you all. This is our second strategic plan. We wouldn't have any of these types of things. These were all born out of the EDA, who is here in a bipartisan fashion to support the community itself and most especially the business community. So here's the enabling legislation. Late at night, you can read this but it tells you the things that EDAs can do. And really, from a state, we're a Dillon rule state. So that means our permission to do things as a municipality a lot of times comes from the state. They have the legislation that enables us to do that. So you can see all the things that you can do. Enter into contracts, acquire property, improve and maintain property, lease or rent property, sell or donate, issue bonds, employ agents such as real estate and attorneys as appropriate, appoint committees, borrow money. You just really are the whole economic arm of the city. I think this is really good for even staff to read what your powers are, and you have bylaws that
Support
govern what you do there, right? So the funding for the EDA and this EDA in particular is rental income, bond fees, investment interest, the revolving loan fund. I pulled the revolving loan fund interest this week, I think. Time flies when you have fun.
Can you just say what that is?
So what that was is that back in, just a little history lesson, back in 2010 maybe, there was a loan made to Riverview's art space when it was being developed, and we called it When Pigs Fly, because if you'd ever thought that of all the people to pay the EDA back, the art organization paid the EDA back in full. So they paid the EDA's loan back $1 million, and that was when the bottom fell out of it was out there where people couldn't loan money. The banks couldn't loan money when the recession started. So we started a revolving loan fund to try to help people. We weren't trying to compete with banks. We were trying to just get people upright until they could get to it, till their loan could be approved by a bank. And so what we ended up with was a revolving loan fund. We probably had it for 10 years or so. And that money was used in there. So that money was put back to work, with loans. And I would say that almost all the loans we did were in partnership with a bank. So whatever portion the bank wasn't willing to loan, that's what we loan.
Is it active today?
No.
No.
And so we had that loan, and the back room administration and that type of thing for the loan was run by the Business Development Center. So at that point in time, the Business Development Center, which is the building out on Mill Ridge, that was built with federal EDA money and city money back when there was a layoff at BWXT and there was money available to build things. And so that incubator was built out there. And they had a Fed EDA loan that they administered. So, that was dwindling, and so in order to help the the business development's gonna retain employees, we paid them to handle the revolving loan fund for the,
They did
For the
administrative.
and they still do. You have one loan left.
Right, so we're
And
not
they're-
making new loans. but
They're
there's
not
one
making
loan
new
that's
loans, but you have one loan left and that's still being paid. But the interest that was paid on that over its existence while we're still making loans was over $300,000.
Who's the one loan left with
Charlie Catalano,
for stuff down?
parking lot.
Parking deck.
But I think it balloons next year. I think it comes to the end of it next year. But revolving loan funds are really, really helpful tools, but we learned that risk is not part of the vocabulary in the city of Lynchburg. So those loans are really, our loan, I think our minimum loan was 250,000. And I think when if you had it to do over again, you'd make that face value much, much smaller, right? So that, and you really would talk about the risk a lot more, when you make loans to startup businesses.
The only one that had trouble was the market.
Community market.
No,
No, the
grassroots.
market, the grocery
Grassroots.
store, grassroots.
Oh, right.
It's the downtown grocery store.
so also your pass through, for incentives, so, when the state participates in an incentive, the money for that incentive, when it's given to the company, passes through the EDA. Checks are written from the state of Virginia Economic Development Partnership, and those checks come here, and then you turn around and cut a check to we're the bill collectors for the state of Virginia. So we've gone through a lot of iterations there while I've been here. And at one point in time, when they did a performance agreement, we all participated. So the EDA was on the performance agreement for the Virginia Economic Development Partnership and in accordance with the business we were working with. Now, the EDP likes for us to have our own performance agreement with the company. They have a performance agreement with the company. So we manage all of those. And then City of Lynchburg transfers when the city enters into a performance agreement. We have 2 of those where net new tax revenue that you wouldn't have had is, given back to a project in order to have that project move forward. So you've got the Virginian is the one that we have. When the city takes those, that tax revenue that's been generated per the agreement and gives that back, it passes through the EDA. So that's additional, Keisha keeps up with all of that. All of that flows through here.
Do we earn anything on the flow throughs?
Well, no, because they come in and go right back out, right? So, the Virginian is different because you're actually the lender.
Yeah. I was just wondering.
So, and the truth is on any of those that you want to dig down into, when you want to read the performance agreement, all those are in your folder. And if you want to know about any of that, Ted or we're more than happy to,
But in this
to talk
project
through
you
that.
cite later in is the Virginia the only one where we're the lender?
Yes. You took advantage of the fact that they needed a loan. They could have gone to a bank and get it, or you had money and you were able to lend it to them. So that meant that the EDA is going to make the interest off of that.
Right.
So you're not only, facilitating a project, but you're also able to make more money than you would make if it was sitting in cash here, especially back then.
And that's the only project?
That's the only with the city besides Rosedale, and Rosedale is where they're gonna build a road And that performance agreement with the city says that the city will reimburse them for the road with the commercial taxes that are generated off of that development. And so when they collect any commercial real estate, or, you know, were there to be a grocery store there, or were there to be any other kind of entity, all of the commercially driven taxes, not residential, the city would dedicate those, and they flow through the EDA back to the developer.
Gotcha.
Until such time as, the amount that was agreed upon is paid off. Does that make sense?
The authority is merely a conduit. It doesn't have any responsibility to do anything other than pass the funds through.
With Holiday Inn being for sale, is that any kind of conversation that we get involved in of what we would like that to be or become, or from a tax standpoint or
Yeah,
business? Or anything?
not, I mean, we're involved in all you know, we try to be involved in all conversations, but I mean, when it's a private sector owner, the leverage that in that situation would just be the city owns the parking deck. So,
From a standpoint for the city, is it better for it to become apartments tax base, or is it better to have the revenue and all the fees?
but
that
we want
generate
it
from
to be a
hotel?
hotel.
Okay.
So that's the,
So on Grays Mill Road, the 20,000 units, whatever it is going up there, were we a part of that conversation?
you're the road that's being built up in there, you're the conduit for the
Only
cities.
for the road.
That's just the road. The city made that deal, not you all.
Yeah,
You are the city's conduit. The city can't write a check to Tom Bell
So, sorry, but what deal did the city make?
to reimburse them up to a certain amount with the taxes generated by them with the new development that would go in there to pay for the road.
It's roughly like 5.3 million.
So like our number of, well, I guess the
No, the
MSA has grown, but the
maximum.
city of Lynchburg's numbers are
Reimbursement.
somewhat stagnant in a 10-year period. And you talk about how many, I mean, there's a couple thousand.
No,
on
it
Graves
is
Mill.
the
It's
biggest thing
huge.
you've ever seen in your life.
But I
Yeah,
guess, I
it's
mean, this area
crazy.
can support all these new builds for apartments.
Yeah, I mean, you
cottages,
just,
housing.
and these
Are
are
we
all,
up again?
I'm telling you, you're going to please, if you have any time and you can sit through the comprehensive plan, that is something that no you know, that the EDAs that have served here while I've been here have not been necessarily a part of. The comprehensive plan kind of lays out, it's a exercise you go through from zoning, and you look at all of the things. What do you want your city to look
Yeah.
like, and how do you want those things to happen? And obviously they're not static. So the truth is that the city, that housing is an issue in the city. Workforce housing is an issue in the city. And you have got to, with 4 colleges and universities, provide housing for people that don't want to buy a house. They need to be in apartments, and they need to be relatively close to where they're going to school. So there's a balance there, but that balance has got, you know, you really hope, back to your point, like even with the Lynchburg Grand, is like where these things go and how they go and how much influence we can have when it's a private sector owner. That's where it's really important, and from a community standpoint, right? You're hoping that whoever owns it works with you. I mean, I'm not asking somebody to give up, you know, money that they would make on whatever their private property is or all that, but can we have a conversation about where these things might be best suited? And I think what we know is across the country right now, municipalities are really, really struggling, especially the elected officials, because they're getting hit up all the time by, you know, single family home folks that don't want an apartment in their backyard, right? But there's got to be a balance there, because
So
this generation, these folks right now are saying, I don't necessarily want to buy a house here, and there wouldn't be one here if I did want to buy it necessarily.
So in terms of best use for this property, do we look at that and say this is the best use for that property? I'm just curious.
Yeah,
Mhm.
planning in the if you look at the comprehensive plan, you look at the future land use map, they tried to project 10 years ago areas of the city and what they would be best utilized for, but best utilized changes when anything else goes on around you, right? So if something pops up and it's a person that owns their property there and they make it something else, then it's gonna impact, you know, what the best use for whatever you have is. Like, we are always asking the question of people that are trained in community development and in planning, what's the highest and best use of this parcel? But if it's owned by somebody else and it's zoned properly
I
by
wanna
right,
know what you think.
about Rosedale?
Whatever that is on Grace Mill Road.
Yeah, well,
Well,
you know,
clearly we know what
I
you
will just tell you that, you know, if you had commercial, businesses and everything down in there, the Rosedale, all that property, which may very well happen, because they got that huge pad site there
Yeah.
now. Those would be, you know, a development that's got apartments and then has amenities there, and hopefully amenities that the city doesn't already have, like something new and different there. That would be good. Now, the sheer volume of the apartments and all of that part, that's a community development, you know.
And that had to be
question.
rezoned, correct?
Yes. But the other side of it is that right up there over Home Depot, like, there were all kinds of, you know, decisions made when they allowed that property to be rezoned. They put caveats in there that talked about extending the road to Breezewood Drive. It talked about providing access to that flat piece of property right above Home Depot. I was this close to pulling the trigger on a master plan for that. It was owned by Lynch Christian and that group there, but they had worked with me. That's what I'm talking about, community. They'd owned it for a very long time. And we were gonna look at putting a master plan there and trying to get access to it, right? Get a road put in there and that. So we were gonna work together on that when the owner of the apartment complex came and offered a lot of money, which I couldn't fault Lynch for taking for that property. So we can do what we can. Hopefully we have, that's a big part of what Clayton will be involved in, is we're trying to get out there and work with everybody we can to have projects in the city go to the high, you know, try to influence them on the highest and best use, and then try to find ways where we can partner with people. That usually means money or some kind of leverage that you would have there to make them want to work with you. So, funding sources are the sale of property and grants. So most EDAs work or they all work different. I think I've given you all the example that I am asked, along with Harrisonburg and Charlottesville, to present. There is a institute for Economic Development Authority members that happens usually once or twice a year. I will make sure that you all have that. They may have a virtual piece of that now where you don't physically have to go there, but it helps people that are coming into an EDA or an IDA. It gives them a whole school on what that means and how that works. But we're asked every time they do it to get up there and talk about our EDAs and IDAs. And we're all very different. We never knew that when we first got up to give the presentation. We all operate very differently. Harrisonburg's EDA is under the city attorney's office and isn't even in the economic development. I mean, I'm sure they work together, but there are economic development people in that EDA are separate. Charlottesville is, you know, is one where they're funded, their office, the economic development office, like this one, is funded by the city. But what they do is whenever they have a project or whenever the city has a building that's been either given to them or they purchased, they run all that back through the EDA. So it's not like the EDA has its own cadre of things necessarily. They go to the council when they need to do an incentive, when they need to do, when a building comes up that the Charlottesville wants to put back into the field, they come to the EDA and the property, passes through them. So this EDA, as you can tell, has been around longer than there's been an economic development office. So there was no staff except for Ted and the accounting firm. And so there was an EDA for the city before there was an Office of Economic Development. So you all have done things years, and most of the time, if the city wanted a project to happen, then they would help the EDA go out and do that. So let's say Frito-Lay, when Frito-Lay was looking for a place to locate, the state came to the city and the city, set the EDA to go and buy the Pew Farm, which is out there off of 221, to assemble all that land so that Frito-Lay would have a place to choose in Lynchburg.
Does Charlottesville have a decent tax base?
Uh,
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, just how much of UVA imprint, you see their hotels they build and that are not taxable, but the rest of it is considerably.
I don't
below
know
ours.
that's the thing, but there may be some kind of payment in lieu of taxes, but I'm just saying the
Generally what they have
university.
done, I think.
University itself, what that attracts in terms of corporate headquarters and
Right.
different things like that. Sean's just kind of off the chain. But once again, each EDA, is
Right.
very different. We have a manufacturing base here, Victoria, different people like that. They don't necessarily have a really robust We are the center. That's why I am deaf on calling it the city of Lynchburg, because we're the major employer of this whole MSA, all of that. So we have very different. We've got meds, eds, manufacturing. So you all do everything. Buy property, sell property, build a building for somebody, lease it back to them. You've got the colleges you provide and other institutions where you provide bonds for them. I mean, it's just a full cadre of things. Most EDAs, as well as municipalities and economic development organizations, are the sum of their experiences, what's brought to them to respond to. So I know that there's a whole arm of the Charlottesville Economic Development Office that does workforce development, right? Meaning Charlottesville, people that work in Charlottesville at regular jobs can't afford to live there. So
Yeah.
it's those
So
kinds
living
of,
is crazy.
and then workforce development is how do you provide, your entire population, which I would imagine there's a chasm there, entire population with being able to go to work. And we're in the same situation. We have a 52%, as you saw from the last thing, labor participation rate, right? And a lot of that is driven by the fact that there's a lot of students counted in there, and while they're at Liberty, they're not working. A lot of them aren't working. But there's also the standpoint of, a lot of the jobs, people come in from the counties and get those jobs. How do I make sure that Lynchburg City Schools and what we have here are able to take advantage of those jobs or fill those jobs? I mean, we have to look at everything. We have to look at housing. We have to look at quality of life. We have to look at infrastructure. We have to look at school systems. We have to look at all of it, because all of that together is what's going to keep a company here, going to keep residents here, going to make people want to visit here and go to school here, and all of it. So you can't, obviously we can't impact all of it, but that's one of the reasons why, like I said, I think any involvement you all can have with that comprehensive plan, makes sense. Because operate in a, in a vacuum sometimes. So, these are your incentive programs, the capital investment program. These are all based on me going and seeing what all incentives are pretty much based on net new tax revenue, meaning what will we have when this company does this that we don't have today in tax revenue, right? Or economic impact of some sort that we can track. So, we have this synergistic relationship with the state. The state can track the jobs. After 90 days, you pay income tax, so that's what their ROI is. For us, it's your real estate, machinery and tools, business license tax and all that, right? But we love the jobs, but we, 9 times out of 10, probably I'm tracking jobs that are in Rustburg. I mean, the people live in Rustburg, right? Doesn't mean that's why tourism's so important to me, is because even if you go home to Rustburg, I'm gonna make you spend a couple shekels here before you do that, right? I need to tell you what's going on here so I get some of that money back. Job creation. You have a job creation program. You can see these. These are policy. This is what allows me to tell somebody what type of incentives we have. It's also what allows me to tell the state what you all might match or what you all might be able to do for a project. These are all driven by, you have to have the money, you all have to vote on it, and they have to have a performance agreement. So these other incentives, the enterprise zone, that's a state program. And we administer that program for the state. So that is nothing that impacts you all's, it doesn't come through you, doesn't impact your bottom line. It's just a tool in the toolkit. The local redevelopment program is actually funded by council. And because of the accounting of it, we take the money that's in our budget and transfer it over to you to do that program. Then brownfields, you are the conduit or the authority that for which our application to the EPA, we run it through the EDA. We could run it through council or we could run it through the EDA. So it is run through the EDA, and that's a reimbursement grant. So when money is spent for an assessment for the private sector or the city, then Keisha sends a bill to the EPA and they reimburse you. So this is just a snapshot from 2015 to, you've done 18 projects, over 201 million in capital investment, 9 million in local incentives, 2.5 million in state incentives, 1,114 jobs created, and 1,637 retained. So during my tenure here, jobs retained was never looked at. That's hugely important now. So that is something we track. I'll also tell you that what we try to do is we try to track things that we physically had involvement in. I mean, and that's another reason why we have a published business visitation plan that we're all ramping up on, is because we can't even begin to tell you when we hit the streets and start talking to the businesses what happens from that, right? The things we find out, the things that we might be able to help them with. So, so many people get us confused with the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance. And they are a regional economic development operation that all of the municipalities per capita pay into to have them market us as a body, as a MSA, right? But make no mistake about it, the EDA closes the deal on every expansion and every attraction prospect. You all are where they find, they've got to interface when it comes to any kind of thing within the city with building permits and all that. They've got to interface on the business licenses, the machinery and tools, all that kind of stuff. So everything I do, I take whatever the EDA is going to give to said person, it falls within the policy, but it's also, I get my numbers of where that ROI is gonna come from Mitch Knuckles, Commissioner of Revenue, and Jeff Bandy, the real estate assessor. And we now have an annual report that each one of these, projects fills out for us to tell us how far along they are, how much they've spent, and then we track that back with Mitch and Jeff Bandy. So active performance agreements, the Virginian, 2015, 25 million capital investment, 300 jobs, $5 million City of Lynchburg gap financing. So the city agreed to take $5 million over 15 years or 17 years, something like that, to take the new money generated by the Virginian, the new tax money, net new tax money, and give a portion of that back to them to fill that gap. And so the gap is a conduit through the EDA. And not only is it a conduit, but it is, the EDA was one of the lenders. So of that $5 million, there's 3 million of it with a regular bank.
With the bond issue.
Yeah. No, it's not, the Virginian's not a bond issue.
No, well, the bank that lent them the $3 million bank, it's industrial development. Or it's not a regular bond issue that we talk about.
Oh, okay. I have no idea what that is. I'm glad you're here.
We have $2 million.
Right, but it's my understanding that the $3 million loan, the EDA was there for, but we don't really have any, liability
No,
with that loan,
no,
right?
pass-through.
Because it was the pass through, but we took advantage of the fact that as the pass through, we could also act as a lender for the $2 million, which means that the EDA earns interest on the two.
300 jobs is a lot for the Virginia. That includes the restaurants as well.
And includes
Yes.
construction and stuff too. Like
It includes everything it's an economic impact model that comes out and says, we have a model that shows these are the jobs that'll be generated if a project like this comes to your community, right? But for the most part, when we do the performance agreement, that performance agreement would be closer based to 80 or something like that, Sean. That is the number from our economic development calculator. So Delta.
Let me ask a general question.
Uh-huh.
All these, are all 6 of these projects that we can brag about?
Uh-huh.
All of them. So, and I'm more curious about the 3 of the last 3 than the first 3. We
Okay.
have 15 new jobs, 12 new jobs, 13 employees. I would just like to understand how we talk about the return there.
Yeah, well, the
Yeah.
return is gonna
Yeah.
be, when you have 25 million in CapEx, that's where the city sees the tax increase. If you had 300 jobs, the city could do an economic impact calculator, but I couldn't track that. Couldn't track that spending other than that model. So Flowers Bakery is 25 million in capital investment.
Right.
And they retained like 150 jobs there. That whole Flowers is gonna go away. So I think all you need to do, Sackett, is the jobs are what that's all anybody cares about. And those are very, very important. But the capital investment is what drives the tax revenue, part of it. And the retention of the existing employees is incredibly, important. So Virginia Metal Treating, that's a brand new building that was built in your industrial park, $12.9 million capital investment, 12 new jobs, and they're adding jobs all the time. We had a retreat out there 2 years ago, something like, it will blow your mind but that business wasn't here before. it was leasing a space in one of, Vance Driscoll's, buildings out in,
And our 350,000, 258,000, 187,000. One's an incentive.
they're all incentives. 350 is what the EDA committed to for Flowers Bakery. And that 350 will be recaptured in tax revenue back to the city within 36 months.
Okay.
And the same as, that's your benchmark.
Okay.
3 to 5 years
It's
return
3
on
years, I mean.
investment. Yeah. It's 3 to 5, most of them are 3, Sackett.
Okay.
But 3 to 5 years, and like I said, the state of Virginia, not that we don't love the jobs, we love the jobs, but the state of Virginia gets their ROI from personal income tax. When that person's been on the books for 90 days, that's where their ROI is. So when we do a performance agreement with the state is really calculating their entire ROI on the jobs. The city is calculating its entire ROI on the CapEx.
Okay.
But they both work there together because I don't think that the community, really grasps that the CapEx is what generates tax revenue for, it's all in how it's set up for the city. And what they care about is the job. I always care about the jobs, but it's retaining jobs that is critically important. Adding new jobs and putting new equipment in.
A 90-day retention job, a 90-day window is not that long, really, is it? But that's the model.
Yeah, the model is 3 to 5 years, that ROI. And I think that's probably political cycles, right? Because you're not gonna have the same governor in there. You're not gonna have, most of the things that we've done, Richard, come to us because that's what the state requires, not because we've sat in a room and said what it is. So Wood Spring Suites, this just gives you the breadth of what we're doing here, is that I will tell you right now that from a tax revenue standpoint, a hotel with a restaurant will make a manufacturer look like they're sitting still. So think about our economy. I really want you to think about our economy and how this office is working both sides of that fence, right? Because one of the reasons that the tax cut for real estate was so possible was because our trust taxes, our meals, sales, lodging, all of those taxes are killing it. They're fantastic, but you cannot take your eye off the ball on either one of those, and they work beautifully together. If I'm trying to attract you or get you, I don't care if you're a visitor for Gretna, your money spends here. So if I can attract you, to Lynchburg to spend money here, I can also attract you with some of those same things to come as a talent to come here. And we are being asked at every turn to assist the business community in attracting employees here. Okay, this is Clayton World. This is Virginia Metal Trading Sackett. This is the place that had the 12 employees. I'm telling you, if you went over there though, it's so impressive. And they do work for BWXT, Framatome, all these are clusters that are coming because of that. They're home offices in Raleigh, North Carolina. And they've built this beautiful building up there, and their employees are just spot on. For a facility like that, they remind me of Sackett's. You know how it's just, it's like a big, they're a family. And so, Clayton, do you want to do this?
Sure. So yeah, we focus on master planning, leasing, buying, selling, signage, and a big one would be site development and redevelopment. We can do that through multiple organizations that are available in the state and nationally. So Go Virginia is a state office that is run through the Virginia Tech. So we actually got one of the 2 grants that we were awarded was through Go Virginia. Virginia Business Ready Sites, which is focused on, they have a tier system for essentially how close your parcel is to plopping a building down on it within 12 to 18 months. We have a grant for that as well, which is the one that's out at Ivy Creek, just off that cul-de-sac right there, actually. And then brownfields through the EPA. Margette and I were just in Detroit at the National Brownfields Conference. That is buildings, property with real or perceived environmental hazards.
And our grants are for assessments only, right? So it's going in when you're buying a piece of property, or we use them with the private sector. If somebody's trying to sell a piece of property or somebody wants to buy a piece of property, that's where we can come in and say, have you had the phase 1 or done yet? And we could help you with that. So that's what our brownfields grants are for. So when you're, you know, a lot of times if you're doing a site, unless anything's ever been on it before, you're in pretty good shape. You don't necessarily need a brownfield assessment, right? But that's just another tool in the toolkit, because Lynchburg is so old that there's all kinds of things that were done. I mean, you go to Detroit, it is a reckoning to see what the industry, you know, which made them the richest city in the world in the 1950s, but it also wrecked the environment there. And when I think we have anything going on here, it is like unbelievable what they have had in front of them.
So give us
clean
a
up.
few examples of brownfield sites here, like along down the riverfront there on the way out of town.
No, it would be Internet, the old Internet
that's what I
site.
mean.
Yeah, that would be you know, but anything, a brownfield is nothing more than, it's old enough that there may not have been regulations in place to control waste or to control anything. And
Chemicals.
dry cleaners, Bedford Avenue.
Yeah.
Dry cleaners and gas stations, when you talk about urban, those are notorious kind of brownfield sites, but also any kind of industrial, the battery company that was over there off of Carroll Avenue, the old Waytech site, Wayne
Yeah.
Booth, the circuit boards and all that. Doesn't mean it's not like you would envision, you know, it's not a super fun site or anything, but it could have things in it
Yeah, I got
because
you.
there were
Okay.
no, you know, there weren't regulations to.
Okay.
And so when you have one of those, it's like a termite inspection. If you buy a house, you're not gonna borrow money from the bank unless you get a phase 1. And if that's clean, you rock on. If it's not, you go to a phase 2, and then they'll give you a remediation, you know, plan to clean up whatever is there.
Intermet, is that going out like towards the water treatment plant?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a flat area there before
There's an
you
old
get to
building.
West Rock.
Is there an old building
Foundry.
It's
site?
back up behind there. That's the Garnett
Yeah, there's a
Street.
metal foundry that was on that site.
And that's privately owned?
No, the city owns it.
So like at what point do we spend a couple $100,000 or something to try to?
We've
do some
already
stuff
had
to make it more
the,
marketable?
yeah, well, they've got a park plan for it.
Park?
The city's the only area where the city could have public access to the river.
Important.
Yeah,
So-
so they have a plan for it. They have no funding, but they have a plan for it. And so, you know, that's one of the reasons why I got the brownfield thing, because with brownfields, you also can get conceptual drawings done as you try to market the property or help somebody market the property. So sometimes a picture's worth 1,000 words when it comes to trying to convince council or citizens or whatever what something could be. So we have been working
Does the city
on
view
that.
us as a potential partner there?
No, I don't, they know you're already a partner for the work that we've done, right? But I think that, just like you all sitting in here, I think people have a really hard time understanding what the EDA does. So one of the reasons that I put this presentation together is so that we can share it with the planning commission. Because I don't know, you know, I don't know that people really, you know, unless you've been in, you know an EDA or something. But that's one of the reasons why we're so glad that you all can serve for 12 years, is because it takes a while to get your feet wet.
So I'm sorry to keep asking so many questions, but that's
No,
why
you're
we're
why I
here. So
did
when you
that.
say the city owns that land and has no money, so what are they going to do?
Sitting on it.
Okay, and so at what point do we collaborate? And, you know, it's an important riverfront access, it's important. I mean, at what point is there a conversation?
Well, I think by doing the brownfields assessment, we start a conversation with them on that. I've gotten plans, there are plans probably in your Dropbox that show the Garnett Street building, what that could be. I've done an assessment on that building and, you know, structural assessment on that building. So, and I've shared all that with Winter, and we've also shared all of that with developers.
Okay.
So the park going in there, when you go and look at the plans for that park down there, it's very, very expensive because A, you're gonna get access to the river, and B, you're gonna reroute the
Yeah, you have to
road.
reroute the road.
When you see it, it'll kind of blow your mind, right? Well, it's wonderful, right? But having all those things allows you to go out and it's not like we are working with them. Whenever Clayton sits in ad nauseum meetings, Alicia sits in ad nauseum, we sit in meetings all day long about anything that goes on, like when community development has a meeting or they have a downtown development meeting, we're sitting in that. And we're sitting in any of these meetings to look for opportunities to jump in there and say, could we help with this? Could we?
But we would
could
never
do
buy it.
that? We could if the city may give it to you, right? That's what happens. They gave you the Carter Glass building because they didn't want to have to market that. That's what happens with a lot of this is that they own it. Like right now, all the city-owned property, if it were developable, you know, they could assign that to the EDA and the EDA could then do things, you know, with that, but we're not there yet.
But I mean, this downtown park, if we have $6-7 million, 3% interest this year, if we're not spending on anything else, are we able to allocate some money to help push some of this
Yeah.
along?
Yeah, it's not even in the design phase. It's not,
You're saying no or
yeah.
yes?
No, I say yes, that would be,
Right.
Yeah, it's just not, you'd be pushing the city beyond where they are with executing. It's not ready for prime time yet, meaning, and the other thing is you all are the only incentive arm. So if a big project comes through and that money is there or somewhere else, it's just a balance, right? So it's not, that you couldn't do that, but it's not even, it's not even in CIP.
Right.
It's not even on, you know, necessarily, you know, their radar to execute, you know, on that. But don't think that whenever any opportunities come up to try to do those things, we're not sitting there to try to be involved in that, at least to be involved in the, you know, what they're gonna do with it. And that's a new thing, right? Because they used to not even include this office in the meetings
How long has the city owned the land for?
a long time.
Right.
Yeah, they took it over, and not only that, Sean, but they used that for laydown area. So they're not, Kemper Street they're using for a laydown area up behind the Chamber of Commerce, that parking lot belongs to the city. All of that is being used, and I mean, like I said, there's a CSO project going on down at US Pipe in 2024. This tunnel project, it is the largest project the city has ever embarked on. And that is going to require lay down and all. So the city, you know, operate, it's not, it looks like it's just sitting there, but there's all kinds of this is what I navigate when we're talking about all that. So you have 2 industrial parks. They're almost completely built out. This is your Ivy Creek Industrial Park. That's where you have sites A and B that we're working on.
I see a familiar name. Is that an ink company? The one on the
Yeah.
bottom? Donek Euroflex?
Mhm.
It's a German company, yeah.
Yeah, they just took the Milwaukee Iron building across from BWXT. So your building that you leased to BWXT is in that industrial park. So this is Lynchburg Center for Industry, and that is completely built out. The only thing vacant is the master brand building there. And that building is, we understand, is under contract. Here's your properties. And like I said, everything on Wigington Road, Chapel Lane, the Jefferson Ridge Parkway, all of that is looked at and, you know, included in either the master plan or in something that we're currently looking at. So number one, we've done a master plan for Wigington Road to look at not only what was developable, which we are executing on right now with sites A and B, but also to look at what you might be able to put up for sale to generate additional income. So, you know, like I said before, strategic investments, Opportunity Lynchburg website, the Lynchburg Loves You brand strategy, destination development, really, really important. Business attraction, talent attraction, Airstream Ventures is a group we're working with to bring sporting events to the city. They kind of they deepen the bench for Andrew in there. Co-Starters is our entrepreneurial program that the Small Business Development Center up at the Chamber, you know, runs for us, incubating small business. It's a curriculum. Then internships. You all participated in CloudFit's internships, and I've broadened that based on you all's direction this year. And EWI, the Edison Welding Institute, that is an advanced manufacturer think tank that provides services to our manufacturers here. We're probably the only people in the country that have an economic development office that has a partnership like that. They were integral. One of their former employees or vice presidents was integral in writing the Tech Hub application, which we hit the button on Tuesday. And strategic planning and consultation. So these are all the things, like you're talking to me, Sean, and Sackett about, you know, getting involved on the city side. These are all the things that you all make possible that would never happen on the city side without the EDA. There's just really, if you go to places, I've spent a lot of time, because winter comes from Norfolk, looking at how Norfolk's things were structured, and over the years, right, they got different assets than we do, but you know, how they've set it up to fund things. You know, like taking a portion of certain taxes that come in, making sure you reinvest in that. Those things have not necessarily happened here. So here's our brand. We are getting so much positive feedback about this with the business community, which is exactly, you know, what we had hoped to do. So this is, you know, time for discussion, but you all have discussed while we went through it, which is awesome. And what I'd like to do, based on the questions you've had, and some of those, is like take some examples from the things that you've said to me and put something together. Not only that, but I'm going to, Keisha and I and the whole team here is working on the handbook. And what I really want to do is at one of the meetings, I want to go through the handbook so that you all are connecting the things we're talking about with a physical thing. because all of that, we've tried to clean up your Dropbox so that you know, you can go in and connect things, but I really want you to, if something has a performance agreement attached to it, at some point in time, you're looking at that, you know, you've looked over it, you see it, and so when we do it in here, we go in closed session, when we do any of these things, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You'll know that there's a guiding document that Ted's approved, you know, that we use for that. You'll know on these, you know, and I also just have you think that when we think about, there are 16 departments within the city, I believe, 15 or 16 departments. They all kind of operate independently.
Mhm.
And in order to be an economic development, I have to know what's going on in all of those. And I have to be able to interface in there, plus do the rest of the work. And until the last 5 years, there was only me, Melissa, and Anna. So this office was fully staffed back in the day when Ted and them started. They had the whole 10th floor over in the Bank of the James building, and over time and decisions made, the office was whittled to 3 people, right? So we're just really staffed at this point in time, and many thanks to Winter to fully get out there and start to have these conversations. And once again, I know I sound like a broken record, but the comprehensive plan and understanding, like the very questions you all have asked here today, you know, just, you're gonna have a meeting with the planning commission, but that's gonna be like, you know, going to a cocktail, I mean, you'll be in the room together and all that, but I hope you will stay engaged in at least following the strategic plan and what happens, I mean, the comprehensive plan, I'm sorry.
No, not at all. Thank you. I have a sort of broad macro question, which may not belong in this conversation. I have no idea. I naively, frankly, haven't completely understood maybe the statutory framework for EDAs. And one of my learnings from today would be, if I'm correct, that our structure is not necessarily representative of other structures. Is that statement that's true?
Yeah.
The way that we're set up.
It is like they're set up, meaning you're appointed by council and you have the powers, but I'm just saying how each one of them operates is a function of who's the city manager and council.
Okay, so really what you're talking about is an operational
Yes,
structure.
it's
But in terms of
operational.
the fundamental source, if you want, we all have identical powers as
Yes,
defined by statute.
absolutely,
It simply is an operation. Operationally, we differ
right.
in the structure.
And what they need you for.
Sure. And there may be some efficiencies and inefficiencies depending on, I suppose that my fundamental question is, which aligns maybe with, has to align with the strategic intent of any organisation. What are we doing well, what are we not doing well? Have we ever had that fundamental conversation?
Well, I think.
Have we ever gone back to the source and said, given what we're trying to achieve as an organisation, are we aligned around basically that fundamental understanding?
Yeah, and I think that you.
I don't understand that. I don't
Right,
think we are.
I think that you could, I think it's really like a scattershot in terms of what's brought to you to execute on, but I do think you could put it into buckets and say, how well have we done on business expansions? But it would have to be those specific expansions that you were engaged in. How well did you hit the needle? Because my metrics for that are, did we meet the ROI?
Yeah, I understand that. Not sure. I suppose, and I'm obviously, I'm not asking the right question, maybe, or being inarticulate in the way I'm asking it. Are we satisfied as an EDA that we are set up the way that we need to be set up to achieve the goals that we want to achieve? Have we ever gone down that road of really sort of aligning around that? I think we have. We understand where we're coming from, and the examples are great, but have we ever gone back to that source and said, okay, this is the way we need to really be aligned with the city, I guess, around what it is we're trying to achieve? Is there a time for that conversation? Do we feel as a group that we need to have that conversation? I don't know. It seems to me that we're not, and that's not a criticism. It's simply, do we need to a conversation, at least internally, and should it be just us as a group getting together and deciding that before we go to the city and say we need to basically get involved in a different way? I don't know.
Would you answer that question? We have been, but not now.
We've never
Never been.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't know what happened before I got here, right? I don't know. I mean, the EDA is appointed, and in many cases, the city would come to the city manager, or the city would come to the EDA and ask them to perform the functions that they are by law allowed to do, right? Like buy this property, act as a conduit, do all those things, right? So in one way, Rich is right, you're there to serve, the citizens, but you're also there to serve, what the city, this arm of the city, and what needs to be done, right? And so I think in the past, what has happened is the city manager and people like that really believed in the people that sat in the rooms here that were appointed, that knew best what was needed to happen in the, like in the business community. What were we missing? Because filling a pothole is what Public Works did, not how do we set the tone for quality of life here, or how do we market ourselves to the outside world.
I suppose it's a bit chicken and eggish in a way. But this is an apolitical group,
Yes.
which I really respect, and frankly, one reason why I'm involved. But the other bit is a
Yes.
political group, which goes from the weird to the wonderful,
Right.
just based on what you read in the paper, and that's all I go by. And it may not be rational to expect that you're going to get that direction.
Absolutely. I
So-
think that's
so
really,
it's-
but you all coming together and talking, I mean, any information, that we can give you,
Mhm.
right? And you all coming together and saying, we tried to put a strategic plan out there that says, here's what we think we want to do. We want to, support the businesses that are here to the extent that we can, because once again, all you have is us, right? To go execute that. And we also work for the city. We're staff to you, but we also have things that we have to do on the city side of it. But I think you all coming together and saying, this is how we want to measure it, or this is what we want to do here, is not that's what a retreat or discussion, any of these things can be about. So.
But in your tenure, has that happened? It doesn't sound like. It seems like we've been a reactive organisation.
That's sort of my question.
Yeah, and is there an opportunity? Should there be an opportunity to get together and just really fundamentally assess? What are we trying to do here? Not that we're doing great work. It sounds like I'm being critical. I'm not at all.
No.
It sounds like we almost need a different conversation here, and go back to basics in a sense and say, okay, there's a lot that needs to happen, and there's only so much cloth to cut from. Given the statutory framework also, and also this other dynamic that's going on. What are we really trying to achieve here? And really sort of then measure that to our performance against that as we go forward.
Yeah.
We have to pitch it, obviously, because we need that partner on the other side to agree to it, it sounds like. Right? So again, no, maybe not.
No, you're an independent
Okay.
body.
Um,
I mean, you're gonna be limited by the support.
Sure.
Support meaning dollars or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
but
sure.
they don't,
Yeah.
that they really, for all of them, it's much more of an idea of not really understanding, what an EDA was. It's never been interference or anything like that.
So I suppose it's a question that remains
And
unanswered.
certainly we could have a facility, Stephen, I mean, we could have a facilitated discussion where, he probably knows how a lot of things operate or how they go about things, but there's only, we try to impact on a broader scale the businesses that are in the city. You only have so, many dollars and different things like that. So that is certainly something that we can facilitate.
I think it's a huge ask because there's a lot of work there. It just seems like to me, there is a need for maybe a conversation internally around that, but all to get together. Maybe we have some missing members to sort of really try and determine what it is we're trying to do. Because I think there's a lot of consequential effort that comes with potentially an outcome of a meeting like that. And everyone needs to be really on board to to sort of dig in and say, okay, if we agree to do this, and we're going to bring in maybe a bit of heat around that too, I'm guessing. But I think that maybe a conversation like that, a facilitated conversation internally, may be warranted. Throwing it out for its worth as a
Sure,
reacting to what it
absolutely. Okay.
Thank y'all.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that presentation.
Yeah.
That was-
Thanks,
Thank you so
everybody,
much for doing that.
And
It's
getting
a
That's
big
very
help.
helpful, yeah.
Next up is our staff report.
Yeah, so in the interest of time, you all, we've got a few of the things that we have been working on for you all to look at. So if you have any questions about any of that,
Call.
Good report.
please.
Did I see that the logging of those sites in Ivy Creek has got a schedule?
It is at this point going to procurement to have a bidding contract put together.
Okay.
So that should be in the next month or so, I'm thinking. And they're still hopeful to start in October.
And once we get a contract, is it then managed by the city's arborists?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we are not doing anything with it in terms of administration.
It's really good deal.
And we're waiting to find out, I guess, if there's any net cost. to
Correct.
the-
Yeah, that would be part of the bidding process. So
So you'll know all that ahead of time.
That'll be neat.
Oh, I think that'll make a huge difference. Okay, we have 2 items for closed session.
Yeah. Want to go into closed session?
Yes, please.
Somebody needs to make a motion.
I made that motion.
2.23711A3 is a discussion and consideration of the acquisition of real property for public purpose or the disposition of publicly held real property. Where discussion in an open meeting could adversely affect the bargaining position or strategy of the public body. And pursuant to 2.23711A5, discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion thereof where no previous announcement has been made of the business's interest in locating in the city or expanding its facilities in the city.
I made that motion.
I'll second it.
Good. We have a motion to head into closed session pursuant to, what's that say?
3711A3 and A5.
Perfect. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Good. We are in closed session. We are officially out of closed session. So now we need a motion to authorize our executive director to commence negotiations on the property we discussed, as well as request bids for not site development, but
Due diligence.
Due diligence. I have a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion as presented. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. I believe that is all for our regular meeting. Thank you all for your time. Next up will be Finance Committee. We are adjourned.